start us off.
So I gave you a little bit of an introduction. What's that? Oh yeah, don't lose your parking violation.
Yeah.
So come on up, Sam. We're doing a series on technology. I introduced that to you in a minute. Last time, for those of you who weren't here, we introduced the idea of the cloud and what's happening in the cloud. I want to set a context for you before we get into mobile devices. Really, the way that we see the world evolving at this point in the technology space is toward devices and services. There are devices that need access to information, and there are services that are provided to those devices. And the cloud thing we talked about last week was more focused on the services side, building the clouds. The Googles and the Amazons and the Microsofts and those big cloud providers who take all this data, whether it's music or video or other things, and they provide it to you, and then you need some way to get access to that, whether it's on this phone or on a tablet or on a PC. I brought in an expert, Sam, who knows all about devices, particularly in the mobile phone space, but he knows like all kinds of way more than I do. And he's an actual developer. I'm just a marketing guy. So, you know, I just explain things to people. Sam actually writes code, writes apps, he develops things, and so he's like, he's the coolest guy on campus, which is why he brings, you know, lots of friends. That's totally awesome. Just big man on campus, very clear. So, no, and Sam is just one of the neatest men. We met several years ago when we were kind of connected through a mentoring relationship at Microsoft. Didn't know that we both had a faith background, and that came up like in our first conversation. And kind of, I don't know that we're doing any mentoring anymore, but we still meet for lunch and we still share ideas and talk about our families and our lives, and it's just been a wonderful relationship. And so I'm really privileged to introduce you to Sam, and Sam's going to take you through the idea of mobility, mobile devices, the history of that, and then he's going to get your interaction on that. Unfortunately, I have to step out at about 10 after 8 to head off to Microsoft for a meeting, but I'll watch the rest of it on video. So, with no further ado, here's Sam.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. So I'm mostly going to focus around mobile devices, cell phones and smartphones. So how many people do have a smartphone?
How would you define smart?
Smart? That's actually a great question. Can it do more than make a phone call? Yeah, that's pretty much. I'll show you guys a little history of cell phones and when the smartphones first kind of came in. Now, I think originally this was going to be sort of panel-like, so please, stop me at any point, ask questions. I might throw out acronyms. I've been working at Microsoft for a long time. I might throw out stuff you don't understand. Just ask for clarity. Don't. It's probably not a dumb question. There's probably other people here who don't know what I'm talking about either. Now, this font looks pretty small. I don't think you guys can see it, but I'm a program manager on the Windows Phone team. It used to be called Windows Mobile. They renamed it, I think 3 years ago or so. Once the iPhone came in, we had Windows Mobile 6 was the version they were at, and the iPhone just took off, and our market share just tanked. They took a few years to just totally redesign it from the ground up. Really took a note out of Apple's book and just focused really on consumer, where before it was all the enterprise customers that they were focusing on. So I work for Windows Phone on the developer platform. My team makes the platform for developers to write apps. So I also write apps myself on the side. This has helped me greatly in my job. There's only, even on this team, there's not many people who have apps. I have about, actually I'll go into details closer to the end. But I've got several apps out there in the store. Some of them make money and some of them don't. Most of them don't.
But you just came back from vacation and got paid for by one of your apps.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think last October I was saving up the money I was making. I was making around $300 a month for the first chunk, and then Windows 8 came out. Are you guys familiar with Windows 8? Or at least heard about it? Yeah. It has a similar app story like the phones do, like the iOS does. And I saved up some money enough to take my family to Disneyland in February. So that was a lot of fun. Let's see if this works. All right. We already had our table questions, so I'm going to go into a little bit of the history, talk about the present state of phones and the future, and then give a bit of details on my story. Okay, so actually this was in the news this week. 40 years ago, this engineer, Martin Cooper, made the first phone call on the first mobile phone. He actually called his competitor up and to tell him,
I did it.
beat you. All right, now, these slides, I just want to show you the history of the phones. Do you guys remember these phones?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Did anyone have one of these? Anyone own one of these? Really? Oh, awesome. I bet that wasn't cheap back then.
I was going to say, how much did it cost?
How much? $9?
Well, I had it in my car, and it
Yeah.
had the transmitter in the trunk.
Yeah.
You could take out and carry around in a bag.
Yeah, batteries are just too big.
Wow.
All right, then in '89 we started seeing the first mobile ones that were coming up. Motorola, you'll see them early on. Like, do you guys even hear of phones from Motorola anymore?
No.
Yeah, it just changes drastically from every 3 or 4 years. The players are different. Nokia's been a huge market player. There's Motorola again. Now, Nokia, you'll see their market share has been huge, especially over in Europe and other areas of the world. You haven't seen them here as much. They have a comeback. Oh, they're starting to have a comeback now with Windows Phone partnership. This was actually considered the first smartphone. '93. IBM worked on this. It was called Simon. I don't think they even sold more than, or made more than like 20,000 units or something. I'm not sure. I don't know the history of what the issues were, but it probably wasn't a stellar experience back then. But so '96, they're starting to get little PCs running with keyboards, and these are getting smaller. '98, Nokia's getting smaller. Batteries are getting more efficient. '99, they're getting even smaller. Some of you may have had some of these phones.
Yep.
Awesome LCD display there. Great graphics. Again, Nokia's kind of getting smaller and smaller. I used to have this phone actually. It was branded Sony though, and again, I think I still have it actually. Flip phones were starting to become popular, and cameras were sort of new around this time frame. And this one here was kind of unique, where it had another screen on the outside. So we've got 2 screens. Over there, you can see some PDA. Introduction of PDAs. You can actually do a little bit more.
Personal digital assistant.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Where you can store your calendar information. And then here, the first BlackBerry came out. Did anyone have a BlackBerry in their careers? Okay.
We called it the Crackberry.
Yeah.
You got an email on it, and you just kept coming.
Yeah, they're. Actually, I went to University of Waterloo in Canada, and BlackBerry came out of Waterloo. A subsidiary company, and they're not doing too well right now. If you've been following the media, they're just on a downward spiral. Similar to Microsoft, they weren't able to react as fast to the iPhone, but it took them even longer. In fact, they just came out last month with their BlackBerry 10 to compete with it, but a lot of people are saying it's just too late right now. Palm OS, they have their own OS. They're not around anymore either. Again, some Motorola. Nokia, and you're starting to see things integrated like GPS applications. How many people use GPS on their phone? Isn't it awesome? I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Global positioning satellite.
Yes.
That was the thing. Was the U.S. had satellites, and so GPS made it possible for consumers, much like the internet was a government thing and was then accessible to consumers. This was the same thing with GPS, and so then it came to the phone, and that has revolutionized.
Yeah, and probably, right around here you'd see a lot of the, portable GPS units that you could get for your car. It would cost you $300–400. Now you buy a phone for $100. It's essentially free. I mean, personally, I love this with my love for technology. Just the integration that we're getting. Just all my music, all my books, all my movies, just everything on one device. I actually have 2 devices. I usually carry a couple around. This is my regular phone, and this is my engineering device. I can't actually show you the screen on this one. This is our next version we're working on right now. So every day I actually it's usually pretty buggy as well. And as we're building stuff, every few days I'll upgrade it to the latest that our developers have built. So usually it's not very stable until we get closer to the end of our release cycle. Here we have Windows Mobile. Came out around 2005, and this was a very popular phone. I think my wife had that Motorola flip phone that was pretty popular, I think, for about 4 years or so. Yeah. Again, Motorola is, there's a few different variants of Windows Mobile. I had that phone there, it's called a Blackjack. Again, this is right before, touchscreen still isn't around yet, or you'd have to use the pen on some of them. These ones usually didn't have touchscreen, so you have to use a little keyboard, or a little touchpad in the middle here. Okay, 2007, big year. iPhone. Do you guys know that when the iPhone first came out that first year, there was no app store? You couldn't install any apps on it. I think people forget that. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, you only had what they built in, but they really revolutionized the phones. They just spent, Apple just does an amazing job looking at consumers, and so that was just, obviously a huge hit. And then there was other phones that were, coming out. Palm was still kind of in the area. Again, we've got a nice Motorola phone, but really nothing could touch this in 2007, or even 2008 for that matter. Let's see. Now here's the first Android. Are you guys familiar with Android? Mm-hmm. So there's a company called Android. Google bought them out. That's their operating system. So just the iPhone is called the iOS. That's the name of their operating system. Then we have Android. So Google owns that, but they open it up. They give it away free. And an interesting thing, Microsoft makes more money off of Android than Google does because of patents. So like the HTC Samsung, everyone that sells these, Microsoft has gone after because the operating system is using a lot of stuff that Microsoft owns patents for. I've only seen the media. I don't know the official number, but I've heard it could be up to like $30 a device or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's unofficial stuff I read off. I read a lot of my Microsoft news on the web. It's got to be right. Everything on the internet is true. Well, actually, let me back up. So here was the iPhone's 3G. This is the first one that had faster speed, 3G, and an app store. That was brand new here. Introduction of the app store. And it wasn't that powerful either back when that first came out.
And an app is?
An app? So, yeah, that's actually a good question, thanks. Apps allow you, there's usually built-in applications on a phone. There's email, maybe a calendar app, a calculator, the GPS application. And, Apple came out with a store where you can go purchase an app or get free apps. And now it's pretty much expected, if you have a smartphone, there should be some app store. And, it really hurts, like, new entries into the marketplace like the BlackBerry 10 I talked about. One of the problems is they don't have a lot of key apps. That was Microsoft's problem with Windows Phone for the first couple of years. Now we're finally at that point where there's, I think, 140,000 apps or something like that. I believe I don't know what the current numbers are on iOS, but they're probably about 500,000 apps or something like that.
So if you think about it, it used to be you bought software, right? You had applications that you went out and bought at a store. You went down to Best Buy or Fry's, and you had to buy these programs, and then you had to install them, and then you had to boot them. Applications are the equivalent of that, and they've been created on the device, and you can download them from the cloud, from the network. And so it really is just a different way of digesting something. So all of your productivity, all of your games, all of your reference, all those things you used to go buy software for. You used to have books. You had a book on this, a book on that, or you had an interactive thing, or you went and bought I used to buy gadgets all the time. Those things have all become programs, and those are called apps, applications. And there are hundreds of thousands of them out there, and there are developers writing them all the time and trying to sell them now over the cloud instead of you going and buying them from a store. So that's really the phenomenon that's been going on the cloud to enable the device access.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, like I mentioned, iPhone has maybe 500,000 apps. The stats, though, I believe I heard once, around half of those 500,000 have only been downloaded once. There's a big problem of discovering these apps. And there's just a lot of people hoping to make money selling apps. It's a very tough market to try to make money in. iOS is probably the most likely to, but only the top 1% of apps in the store will make money. And games kind of fit in there as well. They're like apps. See, 2009, BlackBerry's still, making nice phones, but things aren't progressing too drastically. There's a Sidekick. This is a popular phone. I still see teenagers a lot of times with these doing their little text messaging. And then over there is one of the first better Android devices to come out. That one is Motorola. So you can see Motorola's still around, but they're not as significant as they used to be. Now 2010, this was the introduction of Windows Phone right here. You can see it looks a little different. This here is the iPhone, as you guys probably know. This was iPhone 4 introduction. So first it was a 3, and then a 3G, then a 4, then a 4S, then a 5, and this year it'll probably be a 5S or something. Now the big thing that we have with Microsoft with this phone that we push in our marketing campaigns and whatnot, this is just a static, we use the term static, just kind of stay still. They're just a list, they're just these little icons of apps. And you can go from page to page and kind of, you just launch your app. But this year, the screens are more alive. Things are like flashing. You get these numbers, like, so this says I have 7 emails, this says I have 3 text messages. These photos will start flipping. We call these live tiles. You can personalize your phone a lot more with Windows Phone 7. There's my marketing pitch, so go get one.
That was good for a developer. That was.
Well, it was succinct. It was like, hey, wow, that's a
Yeah,
life.
future. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you want to come chat with me, I'll actually show you the phone later. If you I've got a little better pitch I can get. There's Android again. So this is kind of the marketplace right now. These 3 guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I had one of those, the first Windows Phone.
Yep.
And I dropped it and did something. So I took it downtown to the place where you get another phone. There was one place at that time. And anyway, in the process of moving it from that phone to the other phone, they couldn't transfer the material. And they had all their geniuses in there trying to figure it out. Nobody could figure it out. So I called my son-in-law Microsoft, and he said, go on this thing. And they pushed that button, and it all switched over. It was a new process for, I forget what it was now, for putting stuff on a phone.
So to transfer your data from the old
broken
ones
ones
to
the
the new one?
center of Seattle should know,
Yeah.
but they didn't. What is the lag time between new stuff coming out and people who fix things and whatever know what is there?
Yeah, it can be very long. It's this thing that we, in the industry, we call this readiness. How do you get the marketplace ready? And it used to be that we, like the marketing equivalent of Sam, would get everything ready 9 to 12 months before the thing launched, so that at the time of launch, you had all the support in place so that people would be ready to support all that. What's happened in the cloud is things are being released so quickly that those plans and the readiness, we're having to change the way we do marketing. Like, I have a completely different charter with my team. I keep telling them, don't think old school. Don't think the old way of creating things for launches that are down the road. You got to think quick. You got to think, get people ready quicker. And so using these apps is one way to do it. Using cloud-based kind of interactivity, using Skype training, not having to do big events and doing that all interactively. Those are all things that are being done. It's still a challenge, though. What you talked about is the biggest challenge to get people equipped.
All right, 2011, we introduced a new version of, over the last few years, you see every year there's a new version of each operating system introduced, usually Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. Over there is Samsung, big player right now, huge player. So Samsung, Windows Phone. In 2011, I think, was the iPhone 4S, yeah. And, oh, actually, no, that was last year. And then Windows Phone 8 was something that we released, and Samsung down there is still continuing ahead, innovating on their phones. All right, any questions on the past stuff before I move on to present time?
So,
yeah.
I'm just thinking about, like, even PCs. You buy a PC and it would come with all this, basically, a bunch of, like, pre-installed applications.
Crapware, call that.
Right. And so it seems like you still have that when you purchase a phone. I'm like, oh, there's so much crap. I just want I like a blank screen where I could choose my calendar, I want 4 things.
You know what the problem was? the carriers controlled the phones.
Right.
Before the iPhone came out, the carriers controlled the marketplace. They said what was on the phone. I had that Samsung Blackjack. There was so much crap on that. It was all AT&T stuff, like AT&T music, AT&T ringtones, all these things. And they weren't these apps that did anything. They took you to a web page, all of them. But they polluted your screen. Sometimes you couldn't even uninstall them. Apple changed that. Apple was so popular, and Steve Jobs is a very controlling man, if you've read any articles on it. He controlled everything. He didn't allow them to put anything on there. And, AT&T, I'm sure he pissed off a lot of people at AT&T, but for some reason he was able to get a deal with them. They must have really liked what he was doing. And then once it took off, like everyone wanted, they're probably willing to do anything at all to be able to onboard the iPhone, is my guess.
But the change is now on this Windows phone, my kids all have Windows phones, that's a shock to you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And they went in and basically, my daughter went in and she just kind of held each of the tiles and deleted in about 3 minutes everything that was on the start screen for her. And then she went to the App Store and downloaded all of hers. Within 10 minutes, she had her customized space with all of her tiles and her music. And hers looks completely different than my son's. And my wife's now looks very different than mine. We each have our own interface, and we can all just do it. So, in effect, we are taking back ownership of the thing that used to be controlled by people. Used to have to uninstall things. Now you can just quickly do it. So there's an evolution happening there, but it's still in transit on.
Yeah. And right now there's very strict limits that Microsoft has now controls a bit more. Like we have different vendors or OEMs that make the actual hardware. There's Nokia, HTC, Samsung are the top ones, and they're only allowed a certain number of pre-installed apps on the phone to be there. And AT&T is allowed their set of apps. So it is pretty easy to get rid of them, and I do the same thing. The first thing I do is get rid of the AT&T ones. But the Nokia ones are actually really good. Nokia's put a lot of investment into Windows Phone. Yeah. But you won't find stuff like on a PC, like all this antivirus stuff, all these other things trying to upsell you on other stuff. You generally don't find that on these phones these days. Yeah.
So it sounds like Apple, Microsoft, and Google pretty much have the monopoly, if you will. Probably the barriers of entry have got to be huge, right, for smaller players.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good segue into who are the players. Yeah.
So you'll have to convert me, because I was one of the unlucky with Windows 6 when it first came out. And I know you guys did wonderful things to start out there, and I've heard that 7 is like catastrophically better.
Yeah, I mean it's completely 100% different.
Okay.
Different, and it's winning. It's been winning design awards, all kinds of stuff. And the first year or two, you may not have been convinced if you're moving over from an iPhone just because the apps weren't there.
Right.
You know the big difference, in my opinion, because I've had all of these devices, I've had almost everything that's on there, is that Nokia, when Nokia got in the game, the biggest player in the market started developing on the operating system and innovating on it. That put pressure on HTC. HTC used to just throw stuff on there. So now HTC and Nokia are competing.
Right.
As a result of competing, each of their phones keep getting better. I keep getting updates all the time that are doing that. And so I think competition is really the key there. We didn't have it before on Windows Phone 6. The carriers didn't care about it. Same thing happening in the iPhone space.
Well, I have teenage boys now that are going from Android to Windows for the latest phones.
See, and that's
huge.
I know it is. We really, like, I can honestly say the attention we put to consumers now is amazing. We've really changed our ways and aren't telling consumers what they should do. We're really listening. As a developer platform, we're always out talking to developers who are writing apps, like what they need. They're always, asking for new features, things that they want to do, and we're really listening to them. Yeah.
You mentioned PC security quickly.
Yeah.
What about cell phone security?
Great
I understand
question.
that's an issue with hacking now.
Yeah, so it's an issue of the 3 players, iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. It's mostly an issue right now with Android. Android is the Wild West. Google releases this operating system. It's open source. Samsung, HTC, all the folks building Android phones, they can do whatever they want to it. They can change it completely. When you write an application, I published one Android app. You push it to the store. So there's a website I go to. I build my application with my tools. I send the app off to their store, and it just gets approved right away. With Apple and Microsoft, it's a very closed system. They test it. They make sure there's nothing on it that breaks any, that it's okay for certain the content. They check content. Where Android, you can push anything you want. It's up to the consumer to figure out if that app is good or not. And Android is so open that the developer can pretty much use anything on the phone, so they could tap into your personal stuff maliciously. And I've heard over half the apps in the store, or not quite half, maybe 30% of apps are potential virus type apps or something. So if you have an Android, you just got to be careful. If you stick with the big named apps, your Netflix, your things like that, those are generally going to be pretty safe. But if you start downloading a lot of stuff, you're in the same boat with Android. But with Windows Phone, we sort of are following the Apple model. It's very closed. It's very secure. When you run an application, it can't touch anything else in the operating system. In fact, we're getting developers a lot of time asking us things like, hey, can you make it so I can read text messages? They want to write an app that maybe displays the text messages you get in a better way. But the problem, if we do that, it's a security hole. That means a malicious app could get installed, read your text messages, and send them off to their server without you knowing. So we're very cautious in what we're allowing developers to do. And we make sure when we ingest their app on our servers, we do very thorough testing. And as a developer, it's kind of annoying to me because it takes a week when I push an update for my app before it can get to a consumer. And if they find any problems or bugs in it, then it gets rejected and takes another week. Where Android is real fast, but again, it's the Wild West. It's just, you push it out there, it's there. Okay, so who are the players? So we've been talking a lot about Google and Apple and Microsoft. Now, RIM is still around. They actually still, in the US, have a higher market share than Windows Phone. I'll show you the numbers in a second. But they're falling fast. I don't think we'll see them too much longer. So there's really three main players today. And notice I have Samsung here, I don't have Google. Samsung's really taken over the Android market. They're making, these two companies right here, Samsung and Apple, they're at war right now. And we're kind of just watching, letting them fight it out. We're trying to pick up some of their stuff. Yeah?
With Steve Jobs gone and his paranoia of detail control, and Apple's stock fall, can they maintain things, or?
I think the stock is, I think they've probably, because Steve Jobs was there for so long, and people, at least the executives, have seen his style and stuff. I think they can continue the quality and details, and their stock has been dropping quite a bit lately. I think the problem is people are expecting them to keep innovating and come out with these knockout products that blow you away, these things that no one's seen before. That is so hard to do. They've done it for several years in a row. They just they're at the point now where they're sort of optimizing things, they're adding more services, but they're just not knocking people out with amazing things. And maybe they have a few more secrets. And I just read an article the other day where they said Steve Jobs, because they planned products for a couple of years ahead, he sort of oversaw the next 2 versions of iPhone. I think part of that is to just let consumers feel like Steve's the stuff coming out. I think it's to help their stock right now too, when they release messages like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. We're finally at a point where iOS, to me now, it's kind of boring now. After using Windows Phone and stuff where it's a bit more alive. I have an iPad. My wife used to have she still has an iPhone that we use just for the kids mostly right now. And yeah, it's just every time they come out with a new update, it's just it's a few new things. Actually, it seems to feel slower for me all the time. Whatnot, yeah. All right, so here's market share as of January. Actually, I didn't have time. Just last night, this is from a company called COMSCORE. They measure the marketplace of smartphones. And just last night, there was a release. Apple, so right now, Apple's got 37.8. I think they just moved up just a notch to maybe 38. Google, I think, moved down a tiny bit. BlackBerry moved down to 3.8 or something like that. And then Microsoft moved up 3.2. Not huge, but we've been creeping up slowly. And hopefully, there's still a company called Symbian, which is there, but you don't see much from them. So BlackBerry, I think most of the marketplace just, even though they're number 3 here, just discounts them right now because they don't have anything compelling. They don't see a big future coming there. Here's another look, just another company that provides numbers. I don't know how they measure them, but they were different enough I thought I'd show it, where they showed RIM at the end of February with only 0.7, and Windows Phone was up to 4.1 where it's up. So it's interesting that two different companies have such different numbers, but you know they survey based on different factors and whatnot. Interesting, Windows Phone is now starting to get some momentum. The first 2 years was rough. We didn't have a lot of phones out there. And we're starting to actually beat the iPhone in many countries. India is actually super important, the number of people in India, and China.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing now is there's a lot of pressure, I think, for iPhone too to come out with lower cost devices. They can't afford these $1,000 phones over in those countries.
So what is the price differential in a country like India between the iPhone and the...
Yeah, the iPhone generally, if you buy it without a contract, is probably $700–800 for a new one. Windows Phone, the top tier ones are probably around the same, maybe $600. But Nokia's been releasing lower cost ones. They finally have one, I think, in the $200 range, and that's huge. And they're really starting to sell like hotcakes around the world. So that's really where I think we see ourselves in the future, is the lower cost devices, because you can just get mass market. And then the more we sell, the more we'll attract developers to write more apps. So that's my goal with my teams with the developer platform.
Was this market share data you showed us just the U.S. then?
That was just the U.S. Yeah, I couldn't find a worldwide one this week when I was looking. Okay. So the tech. So, you know, phones are they're highly integrated with our lives. I was going to do something, but we didn't have time. But if you grab someone's cell phone from them, unlock their smartphone, people start feeling nervous when you have their phone. There's a lot of personal stuff on there. You know, photos, messages. You know, if I grabbed one right now, you'd probably be a little concerned. But there's so many things we can do. You know, you can shop. If you were here last month, Kevin showed a little video, a mock-up of the cloud and how it can be used at retail, where they were stocking shelves and just on the fly. People were walking around the store. There was missing stock, and the guy had a tablet. It was being communicated back to the warehouse or something, and they were able to fill things out. When I watched that video myself, it's like, man, I don't even want to go to stores. I want everything to be here. You know, we go to Costco every week or two, and I hate going there. We buy the same stuff. Why can't I just get some buttons? And you can with places like Amazon Fresh, for example. And actually, I'm seeing that a lot now. There's some competition to get stuff delivered same day. Google is doing that in a few markets for some Google shopping. Amazon Fresh, or Amazon is close to that. You can actually buy stuff that's not food as well. You can buy a hard drive and have it arrive the next morning. Has anyone used services like that?
I just did it last week.
Awesome.
Came the next day.
Yeah.
I was desperate.
Yeah. I really miss
I
Home
didn't have to
Closer.
go anywhere. I just researched.
Yeah.
Press buy with one click.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, John, you're in trouble.
I'm so far behind.
I'm behind my wife.
Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of stuff now you can do with word processing, spreadsheets. You know, it's kind of hard to do any detailed stuff on a phone. One of our advantages with the Microsoft phone is because most people use Office, so Microsoft Word, Excel, you can open and actually edit those documents right on the phone. It's not the best experience, but you know, if I needed, all my files are saved on the cloud that Kevin's been talking about, like this presentation I had saved there. So if I wanted, I could open it up on my phone. If I had to do a small tweak while I'm sitting here, I could have done that. And you know, of course, you can do a lot of travel stuff with your phone, banking, email, photography, videography. Probably most folks are taking pictures these days. I don't want to lug around my big SLR camera. So it's really nice. And this new Nokia phone I have, just amazing. It's got a image stabilizer. It takes as good at pictures as a high-def camera. Really great video in low light.
It's funny to see the intergenerational combination of all those, because I was down in Portland for Easter and I saw people with SLRs, people with smartphones, and then some people were taking pictures with the iPads or the tablets. You know,
I saw some tourists at Disneyland walking with those taking pictures. It was like,
and I'm just like, this is insane. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, always having a camera on you if you need it for an emergency, if you get an accident, you can take a picture, you know, all kinds of different things. So yeah, media consumption, now you can read books, music, of course, videos. But if you picture, you could picture a wall full of all your books and your music and your videos. Like, all that fits in this little phone. And it can either sit right in the phone, or, the future is really the cloud, where it's sitting in the cloud. The nice thing about that is you lose your phone or you go upgrade to a new one, you sign in, just everything's there. So some of the interesting tech I wanted to point out here. So text-to-speech, are people familiar with that? Or speech-to-text, so when you talk, it'll understand you, or vice versa, it'll speak their text to you.
Did you buy Jot?
What's that?
Jot was a service that would let you do speak, and then it'd send a...
Okay, I haven't heard of that one, but the iPhone's got Siri, they've named it, given her a personality. Microsoft's got their own speech engine they use to do that. So we're seeing a lot more interaction now. On an iPhone, you can say, schedule a meet, or remind me in 20 minutes to go to the grocery store, and it'll just automatically create an appointment for you. Does anyone use those kind of features?
I turn it off.
Right there. What's that?
I turned Siri off.
Turn it off? Does she know you? Her voice?
It wasn't the voice as much as it was too buggy.
Oh, okay.
It worked before Apple bought it. That's one of Apple's rare failures. And maybe they fixed it, but they annoyed me enough that I haven't gone back to my
Yeah, and actually I was showing my table back there, but I wrote a news, this is my first app, it's a news reader app. Websites that have news have these feeds called RSS feeds. So instead of having to go to the website, you can install an application that takes all these feeds, you tell it which ones you want. So I have news feeds, tech feeds, and I was having an issue where it takes me a long time to read all my news every day. But this is like my newspaper. So when I started up here, it just shows me my categories, and then when I click on, click on technology, then there's a website called Engadget. It's my favorite tech website. And then I get my list of news. I know you guys probably can't see this very well, and I can click on it, but I wanted a way to, in the car, be able to read my news without, getting in an accident. So when we came out with this, our developer division, we came out with new text-to-speech infrastructure and speech-to-text. So right now, what I can do is I can hit this little play button down here.
Nokia Lumia 720 starts
Reads me the title, and then I can say, next, next, next. So it reads me the next one. So I don't have to look at my phone in the car. It's going through my speakers and Bluetooth. And if I want the details, and it'll read me the news. So I can get through my news. Yeah. So there's a lot of neat things. A lot of this, I see. As we get to the future, it's just going to get better and better. Yeah.
So how do we learn those things? I mean, that's the first I've heard of something like that.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's hard. That's a tough one because when these developers have apps, there's a set of built-in stuff like Siri on iPhone. So that gets a lot of media attention, and you have to kind of play with it to do it. And then it's up to developers writing those apps to integrate with those features. So a lot of times you may not know about them unless there's word of mouth, or you actually get some app that just happens to advertise. It could be tough. Yeah.
Unless you're 19 years or a lot younger, the biggest problem is you get these things, and you just have to feel around and try to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And is anybody coming up with something to get onto these things more quickly, or is it just...
Yeah, and I think, like I said, there's hundreds of thousands of apps, and there's a big problem when people can't discover them. You go to the store, and all I look at is maybe the top list. And that's why apps that aren't in that top 100, because you start flipping through and go, oh, that looks interesting, I'll try it. But, once you're past 100 or two, like, how do you find that? I think it's a big problem. 1 minute. Oh, I better zip through. Okay. There's stuff for eye tracking. Samsung's new phones, you could be watching a movie. It's got a camera on it. It watches your eyes. If you move away, it'll pause the show. Or you're reading news and you look down, it'll like move the news up. I haven't tried that yet, but it's pretty neat. Okay, I just want to get to the future side of things. A big thing Kevin talked about last month was there's 3 companies in the cloud, or there's only 2 could survive in the cloud business. Right now, again, there's 3 big players. There's a lot of media saying that, yeah, 3 can survive. I don't have that answer, I hope. Or at least if there's only 2, hopefully Windows. We'll see what happens there. Where are they going? Generally, they're always getting thinner, more memory, faster, cheaper. And as that stuff goes up, then technology, it opens up technology. To do this voice stuff, you need a fast computer processing as I speak to it that can figure out what I'm saying. So we'll see more interaction, more things that we can't even think of today. A big thing too down here, has anyone heard of Google Glass?
Yes.
And smartwatches? Here's Google Glass. This isn't for sale yet, but they do sell it in limited quantities to developers who are writing apps. They want people to kind of come up with some good ideas for it. So it's a pair of glasses with this little thing over here, this funny thing. It's got a camera on it so you can record stuff. But while you're looking at it, if you look in your right corner, you see a little screen there. And in this case, it's showing you a map. Here, you're at an airport, and it's showing you the current flight information.
Wow.
So a lot of this, we call it wearable computing. I think there's a big future in wearable computing. Another example is smartwatches. These have just come out. They've been crowdfunded. There's an interesting website, some interesting websites you can go to. People have ideas, or they'll build a prototype, and they'll say, come buy the first prototype of it, or the first version of it, and then it raises a bunch of money. And these companies are starting to form in that respect. So here, this one here is called the PEBBLE watch. That one is I'm Smart. And what they do is they connect to your cell phone with Bluetooth. So you can see your text messages potentially on it. You can see your meetings.
Before I go on, you might point out that both wearable tech and the smartphones of the future are in the latest Mission Impossible movie. So
Except for we're out of time.
Yeah.
It'd be great to point out, however.
Yeah. And this last slide in the future just shows that right now, 2012, we saw about 722 million units sold. The future expects that in 5 years to be at 1.5 or 1,500 million. And desktop PCs are kind of falling, not hugely, but tablets are also growing massively. So along those lines, I didn't have time to cover tablets specifically, and I won't have time to really get into my story, but maybe the last thing, I mentioned a couple apps I built. The one I've really had a lot of personal satisfaction with is the one I don't make money off of. I built one for our church for Windows Phone and desktop. So Marcel Church, it's just got amazing reach. People all over the world are watching sermons through this application. Here's, you can see Australia, Canada, Denmark, New Zealand, all kinds of places. But let me end there.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Sam.